Today on Inside Utah Politics, looking ahead to the 2024 election cycle. Senator Mitt Romney's term will be up. Will he run for a second term or step aside? What about other elected officials in Utah? Jason Perry with the Hinckley Institute of Politics is here with some insight. And seniors on Medicare will soon get a break on prescription costs. How the Inflation Reduction Act is bringing prices down.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Jason Perry, the director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics, here to explain what to watch for as we head into a big presidential campaign cycle. Jason, great to have you on the show. It starts earlier and earlier every year. I mean, I realize we have a municipal election this year as well, but a lot of eyes already focused on next year. So let's get right into the top spot. Senator Mitt Romney will be up his term. So a lot of people wondering, is he in?
Yeah.
Is he out? What are the factors we're looking for in this?
Well, it's so interesting. That is the big question right now, and that answer is going to shape Utah politics through the next election and far beyond. There is a very interesting track of candidates that are going to jump in if he doesn't run, and a whole different group of people who are probably going to jump in if he decides to stay in. The one thing that's clear on this decision, and conversations with Senator Romney and others close to him, is he's going to make the decision himself. No one else is going to make it for him. That is what's so interesting about this, and it is his call to make. It has been 75 years since we had sort of a one-term senator who decided not to run again, retire. He gets to make this decision, and he's going to be a pretty tough candidate if he stays in.
He publicly has stated if he feels like there's something more for him to accomplish, he'll stay in. Is there more to it than that?
Well, I think that's kind of it as well. I think he's looking for what he could do if he stays in. I think he's also looking at who might step in after him, who might be able to carry on sort of that legacy or the approach that he has taken as senator. I think he's looking at all of that right now, and I think it really is his calculation because he still has a very ready microphone in Washington, D.C. If he wants to say something, he doesn't have to look far for someone to put a microphone in front of him to say it, and I think he's thinking about that as well. So can he still have influence?
So you take a look at his last primary election. He won with 75% of the vote, really big. But we have seen things change over the last 5 years as far as how Republicans in the state of Utah view him. So is that going to be a factor as he decides whether or not to run again?
I'm going to break this down into two categories. So there's the Utahns in general. So you look at how he does with Utahns, exceptionally well. If he gets to a general election, Utahns are going to love him. His issue is going to be in that primary, like it always is. So he's looking at that right now, looking to say, where are Utahns? And he has a very good base, right, sort of center-right in the state of Utah. Few people on the left. The far right, pretty much with Senator Mike Lee and other people who are much more conservative. So right now, as he's deciding if he's going to run or not, he's looking at that particular segment of his base. Will they show up for him? Will they go for someone else?
We know, both you and I, from our sources, that he was watching closely the Mike Lee versus Evan McMullin race, where McMullin ran as an independent. Did that give any path forward for Romney potentially running as an independent?
I see no chance of him running as an independent. That was an interesting experiment for the Democrats to put together someone who is not a Democrat in Evan McMullin. He did do better than Democrats have done in a race against Senator Mike Lee, but if he was looking at that race saying, do I see an opportunity for me to run as an independent, I don't think that signal was given.
Yeah, because Senator Lee still ended up winning by about 10 percentage points.
Yes.
Talk about the contenders. You already brought this up. If Senator Romney is in the race, who is a potential challenger?
Well, you start seeing candidates like Sean Reyes, for example, people who have run before, maybe like Greg Hughes, people who have been very involved in politics, but might decide to jump in regardless of the decision of Senator Mitt Romney. So I think that group is one that, you know, their names we recognize pretty well. The other side is the one that is so interesting to me, because there are a lot of people, elected officials we know well, who are going to give that deference to Senator Romney, and they're going to wait for that decision, which I think will not be that far from now. I think it will be this spring when we hear. But this will be people like Brad Wilson, the Speaker of the House. I think he's going to give some deference to Senator Romney. I think he's going to be considering this. John Curtis, Congressman John Curtis, he's going to be interested in this race as well. And some of these other notable people that we've seen in elections historically may come back again. But these are credible names, pretty good name ID. They're going to wait for that decision.
So they would be in if Senator Romney is out?
That's correct.
Okay. So that obviously has a huge impact on the representative side as well. What are you looking for as that begins to play out?
So this domino impact is so interesting, and that's why this program here for you is so important right now. We're looking at a ways out, but the dominoes are lining up right now. People are starting to get their campaigns together. If they're going to run for Senate, for example, this is a $5 million race. You're going to have to start raising money. You start getting your supporters. So when it comes to the House, let's just say this, is if Senator Romney does not run, we got a couple of members of Congress, including John Curtis, maybe even Congressman Blake Moore, who might be thinking about it, even Congressman Stewart. All of them are in the House right now thinking, how rare is it that there might be an opening in the Senate? And they're all right now sort of looking at their funds, they're looking at their supporters and wondering what might happen. This would change a lot.
We saw in 2022 that all 4 congressional districts are safe red in the state. What do Democrats need to do to even try to be competitive in those races?
So historically, those have been pretty conservative districts. They're even more now after redistricting. For the Democrats looking at this, it's hard to say there's a name out there as someone who could credibly right now take on one of those members of our delegation. They are that strong. I think the Democrats will put forward some good candidates. They have in the past. Maybe you see Kel Weston come back, for one of these particular races, a very credible candidate on the Democratic side. It's really hard to say right now that the Democrats are looking at this saying, our window is finally here. It's going to be hard for them. They will put together a pretty good candidate or two, I believe, but those races reliably red still.
We know Governor Cox is going to run for a second term, and he said from the very beginning he would run from two terms, and that would be it. Any potential primary challenges for the governor?
The one we might see is probably Carson Jorgensen. He's chairing the Utah Republican Party. He's been running that. He's stepping down, and it's become very clear in the circles he's running in that he might want to take on Governor Cox. It's interesting because Governor Cox has already announced that he is running. This has been his tradition. He's running. He announces to be the first one to have his name out.
He's raised a lot of money, too.
He has. He's in a pretty good position right now, getting ready to head into that race. I think, given back to his farming roots, he plants seeds early so the crops come up at the right time. I think that's sort of his strategy. I think that just like in that last race, though, we will see other people come forward to challenge him inter-party. There will be some big names, I think.
Okay, obviously a different dynamic when he's running now as the incumbent versus as an open seat last time.
It is so true. There is so much power in incumbency. It was hard before when we had this plurality issue for him in the primary. Lots of Republicans running. We'll see if he can clear the decks because of his popularity, but that's a big one for him. But he's even stronger now.
And back then, he won convention and the primary. Since the implementation of SB 54, he's the first statewide office with an open seat to win both of those. Yeah. Has that potential dynamic changed as we go into the next year?
Not really. He's still in solid position with those delegates and also with Utah Republicans generally. Governor Cox, I think, announced early because it's his style, but also because he's riding pretty high on his popularity. I think he's in pretty strong shape going forward.
Okay. Let's move into the presidential realm. You've done some polling on this. How are Utahns looking at this? What is their appetite when it comes to the presidential race on the GOP side? We know former President Trump and Nikki Haley have officially jumped in, and we know other big names are going to be jumping in.
So Utahns right now are really just getting a peek at what the possibilities might be. We've done some polling on the potential candidates. I'll tell you who's not done very well is former President Donald Trump. He's third or fourth in most of our polling over the past couple of months. It's interesting, Ron DeSantis in Utah, it was just over 24% of Utahns said if he decides to jump in the race, which he hasn't yet, if he does, they may be willing to consider him. He's a viable alternative. But then we'll see some other big names, as you mentioned, people like former Vice President Mike Pence might jump in. Nikki Haley's going to put a very good campaign together. We're going to see some of those names we've been looking at for a little while come forward, but Utahns, at least right now, look at someone like Governor DeSantis as someone sort of a little bit like President Trump on the policies, but a little less like Trump in the other ways that were more concerning.
Yeah. All right. I wish we could finish this take this conversation further, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So much to talk about. Really appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Glenn.
You bet. Still to come, Utah officially has a new state flag, while efforts to have voters overturn it are still underway. Our panel will weigh in on that a little bit later. But first, President Biden's first veto. Why investment rules have the president at odds with congressional Republicans. Welcome back. Next month, seniors on Medicare may see some savings on certain prescription medications. That's thanks to a law Congress passed last year. Experts saying those savings on the drugs could also be passed on to everyone. Washington correspondent Alexander Lamone explains why.
Starting April 1st, Medicare recipients should start paying less for some medications.
If they try to increase the price beyond the rate of inflation, then we get to yank back those extra dollars.
Secretary of Health and Human Services Javier Becerra says so far 27 drugs are under review because their prices increased too much.
We will return that money to Medicare, and certainly then that means to the 67 million people who are on Medicare.
While the rebates could take time, Medicare recipients will start saving on their co-insurance for those medications next month, and they could save as much as $390 per dose.
The drugs that are on this list are drugs that are administered by physicians, either in a doctor's office or in a hospital.
The administration says the list of drugs could expand. And Juliet Kubansky with the Kaiser Family Foundation says everyone could end up benefiting from this new provision.
There is an incentive for them to sort of keep their prices their price increases below the rate of inflation.
Because of the Inflation Reduction Act that President Biden signed last year, Medicare recipients can also expect more savings in the coming months and years, like negotiated drug prices. And in 2025, a $2,000 cap on out-of-pocket expenses for prescription drugs. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
President Biden issuing his first veto during the week. The action kills a Republican-led effort to prevent companies from prioritizing social issues over profits. Democrats call the bill radical and counterproductive. Washington correspondent Raquel Martin has that story.
I just signed this veto.
In the first veto of his presidency, President Biden says he's taking on so-called MAGA Republicans. The veto effectively kills a GOP-led effort to discourage companies from supporting environmental or social causes, or what Republicans call
the latest woke left policy.
Earlier this month, Republicans like Senator Josh Hawley voted to end a Labor Department rule allowing retirement fund managers to consider things like climate change and social issues in their investment decisions.
I want them to be focused on protecting the funds, the money, the hard-earned cash of folks who have worked their whole life and paid into these pensions.
Republican Congressman Ralph Norman says the practice hurts Americans' bottom line.
If you look at the stocks, it hasn't done well.
But in his veto message, President Biden says there's clear evidence proving that theory wrong. He says doing away with the rule defies common sense.
Would put at risk the retirement savings of individuals across the country.
John Forward, the director for the Institute for Corporate Responsibility at George Washington University, says the issue is being politicized.
It is smart business. Stakeholders care about these issues. Their customers, their workers, and their investors.
Ultimately, 2 Senate Democrats did vote in support of the bill, but currently Republicans do not have the 2/3 they'd need to override the veto in both chambers. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
Coming up, Utah's new state flag has been a source of heated debate. Our panel weighs in now that it's official after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have Salt Lake County Councilwoman Suzanne Harrison and State Representative Corey Malloy. Glad to have both of you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start off with the new state flag. It is just kind of surprising how big of an issue this became during the session and how heated the debate came. It is now official. That is a look at the new state flag right there. Councilwoman, let's start with you. Do you like the new state flag? And if you do, explain why, and if not, explain why.
You know, I think this is fun. I really appreciate the process that the folks went through to seek public input and to get input from all over the state on this. I think it's great that there's a way to still have our current state flag and incorporate this new fun one, and I'm excited to get a new sweatshirt. So,
I've actually seen a lot of swag associated with the new flag. Representative, you voted against the new state flag. Talk about why.
Well, I think the tradition of our original flag is very, very important. I really like traditions. My constituents really liked the flag, and so I had a lot of people requesting and asking me to vote no, and I felt the same way, and so that's why I voted no.
Do you like what the governor did here with his executive order? He basically said now we have a historical flag along with the new flag, and that historical flag will still fly above the new flag as at the state capitol. Do you see that as kind of an olive branch extended to those who view it the same way you do, Representative?
I'm not sure. Well, I think it is an olive branch, certainly, but I think more importantly, it's just a nod to the past and to the traditions that we've had throughout the state. And I think it holds that flag in a good position as far as honoring that flag and what it's represented all of these years. So I think it was good for the governor to do that, and we'll see. I think, you know, there's a referendum out there, and I don't know if that's going to work or not. I think what I've been telling my constituents is the vote passed, and so we have a new state flag, and I think eventually I'll embrace the flag as well as many other people throughout the state.
I'm glad you brought up the referendum because that is in the works. Last check, not many signatures had been turned in, but that doesn't necessarily mean those are the only signatures they've collected at this point. Councilwoman, do you see a referendum being successful in this situation?
I don't. I think it's really hard to get enough signatures to get anything on the ballot, and they're going to be up against a really high bar there. And I think residents care more about other things. I think they care more about cost of living and air quality, saving the Great Salt Lake, and I just don't think this rises to the bar of like urgent pressing issue for most residents.
That's a really good point because you also referenced the process a little bit earlier. This had more public input on a lot of issues that you just referenced. Representative, what do you make of that when you take a look at how many people came out and voiced their concerns on this issue?
Well, I think it's certainly interesting. I believe the process was a good process. You know, a couple of years ago, we voted to fund the task force, and so that is what occurred, and a lot of people participated. So I'm not too concerned about the process. I just kind of hate to see our traditions disappear, but we'll move forward. I think the flag is a good flag, and people will embrace it, and we'll just move forward.
Councilwoman, I'd like to get your thoughts on the process, just how many years this took, how many people came out to give their opinions on it. When you mentioned just in your last statement that there are other issues that are more impactful to people.
You know, this has been a several-year process with thousands of people participating, either in giving ideas for possible flag design or giving feedback on the finalists. The process was really thorough and had so much public input, which I really appreciate. And I think people are excited for having this additional option as a way to celebrate our pride in our state, and it's symbolic of many of the things that we hold dear.
Let's move on to another subject. During the week, we saw the president veto his first bill as his time in office, and it was in regards to environmental social governance, or ESG as most people know it, and the bill essentially would have banned ESG investment products, not even had it as an option. We've seen some state leaders really get on this issue and talk about it throughout the state. Representative, let's start with you. Do you believe the president did the right thing with that veto?
No, I don't. I think I would love to have seen that bill go through. I think it would, if the bill would have gone through, it would have been in harmony with what we've done here in the state of Utah, as well as you know, several dozen other states throughout the country. I think this is something that, you know, the people are just starting to really fully understand and grasp hold of, and they're not liking what they're seeing, and it's taking responsibility away from our fiduciaries to really just run business the way business should be run and leave these other things out.
Representative, your thoughts on, or I'm sorry, Councilwoman, you're a former representative, that's why I get that mixed up.
She's always going to be a representative.
Yeah, exactly. Your thoughts on ESG, should it at least be an option for those if they want to in their investments?
You know, I think that we have to just take a step back. This issue has been so politicized that I think in many ways we're literally talking past each other. And as a little bit of background, the Department of Labor has a rule that allows private business fund managers for retirement accounts to consider additional information and factors in making the best decisions for those retirement account investments. Those decisions and those factors can include things like whether a company mishandles toxic waste, whether it violates like pollution laws, whether it is exploiting child labor or has unsafe workplace situations and environment, whether the company is engaging in, unethical business practices or using unethical, untransparent accounting practices. I don't understand why we wouldn't want to give private business fund managers the ability to consider any factor that would help with the bottom line for investments. I don't understand why it is the government's role to tell a private company what information it can and cannot use in fulfilling its fiduciary responsibility to clients to make the best investment possible. Just to give you a little example, this would be like the government telling people they can't invest in, they can't consider whether to invest in a tobacco company and not consider that the product causes cancer or that it causes air pollution or that, the company lied to the public about the data on health effects of smoking. Why would the government get involved with telling private companies what information it can use in fulfilling its fiduciary duty to maximize investments for clients? I think we owe it to hardworking retirees to let the folks investing that money to use all information to make the best decisions possible.
All right, let's move on to one last subject we saw through the week. That was the governor signing 2 social media bills that were passed in the legislature on Thursday. They require age verification, parental consent, also including a private right of action if parents feel like their children are harmed by social media. Representative, you voted against both of these bills. Explain why.
The reason I voted against it is because of the role of government. What is the role of government? I believe these issues are best left with the parents to work with their kids, to protect their kids, and I think parents strive to do that. And I actually have kind of toned down my position a little bit. I think we do have a responsibility to make sure that we lay the groundwork for parents to do what they can to help protect their kids against the things that we're so concerned about as it relates to social media.
Councilwoman, the governor has really come out swinging on this issue, going as far as to say social media is killing our children. That's what he says motivates him to take action. Your thoughts on these steps the state is taking when it comes to social media?
I really appreciate the legislature's efforts and the governor's leadership on this, because we know that social media is harming all of us, and especially our vulnerable kids. And I think it's really important to work together as parents and as policymakers and with businesses to try to find solutions to help keep our kids safe online and make sure that we're maximizing and protecting their mental health. This is a tough issue. It's certainly going to go to court, but I really appreciate the intent of the legislature and the governor's efforts to try and help our kids be healthy. I think one of the most important things is just making sure as parents we're engaging with the conversations with our kids about healthy online habits and like delaying use of social media until they're able to make good decisions about it.
Okay, we will have to end it on that note. Really appreciate the insight from both of you. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The Utah GOP State Organizing Convention is next month. It's set for Saturday, April 22nd at Utah Valley University. The Utah Democratic Party will meet a month later. Their state organizing convention is May 20th at Southern Utah University. It's also a municipal election year. The primary is set for Tuesday, August 15th. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.